I invite you to consider these words from the fashion critic of the Washington Post. She wrote a few weeks ago, "If there is any color that has ever come close to defining gender, it is pink. Culturally, it has long been assigned to girls. And for generations of women who were stereotyped and bullied into polite smiles and reassuring deference, pink was their bane. Over time, pink ribbons came to symbolize serious women's issues, although typically discussed in soft and fuzzy tones. But this is the era of pink pussy hats. The color has been reclaimed and redefined. It is not about patience and calm or the kumbaya bomb of we are all equal. The new pink," she writes, "is aglow with outrage and the insistent demand that past wrongs be rectified." This commentary was written, as I mentioned, by the Washington Post fashion critic, Rabbi Greene, in a January 3rd article. Some of you may have seen it. Her broader topic was, in fact, the opening of Congress. She writes, "At the start of the 116th Congress, fashion was not merely a footnote. It was a rallying cry, a defiant gesture, a point of cultural pride, a glorious theatrical declaration of self. It was white suits and pink dresses, Native American artistry, a Palestinian thobe, a kenta cloth stole, a hijab, and a skin-tight pencil skirt for the first stole. That is," as she explained, "women in the 116th Congress didn't simply show up in another black or gray suit or navy dress." I say that wearing a black dress. You know. They dressed to declare themselves, their identities, their ethnicity, their authority, their cultural pride. And that pink, well, you probably saw it. It was worn by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Now, politics aside, this is not a political statement, but I invite you to think about clothing. These women were elected to represent their constituents. And they communicated a visual story about the day's place in our country's ongoing narrative. That Washington Post fashion critic continued, "Their choices placed them within their particular communities. The setting, Capitol Hill, connected those various communities in a single national dialogue. The fashion was personal, and for some political, individual, and universal. And the breadth of it spoke to the idealistic notion of freedom, the right not just to dress, but to be." We here can and should look at the clothing of those women, and not just for women to look, but we should look at that clothing against many backdrops. I invite you to consider a few backdrops this evening. First, no doubt, is the backdrop of the personal, which also crosses lines with professional. What do we wear? Why do we wear it? Do we dress to be comfortable, to fit in, to message our own style, to break with tradition? Do we want to stand out or hide in the crowd? Do we wear clothing that joins us to others or separates us for so many reasons? I'm sure that in this sanctuary alone, there are countless stories about professional dress, let alone personal dress, and expectations upon us. And though while I assume that women have received more of those, it's not limited to women. Think about the times in your life when you were told what to wear, as a child, as an adult, as a professional, even in a restaurant. Think about the expectations upon you. Think about family comments, what they told you looked good or didn't look good, when we were noticed, when we were critiqued, when we were told what to wear, to toe the line, or to stand out. The second backdrop links with that is that of profession or context. What do we wear in a particular situation? Perhaps, but not exclusively in our job. What are our uniforms? And what do they connote? They might be literal uniforms or what we wear for certain things. Does it connote authority, the job before us, comfort, uniformity, nationality? Would it be unsettling if you got on an airplane and all the flight attendants wore jeans and didn't wear the colors and all the matching outfits? Or if you walked into your doctor's office and they were wearing their warm-up clothes? Or if I wore bright pink to every funeral, and I don't mean to make that lightheartedly, but what do we expect, what we see, and what do we wear? And the third is timing or occasion. We all wear garments for particular occasions, whether they're official or not. Like an official one might be a white dress at a wedding, or a tallis for a morning service or leading prayer. But I know from conversations with many of you over the years that we wear clothing at particular times. We might wear clothing that belonged to a loved one, their funeral, or on their yard site. We might place our infants in clothing worn by us or by our parents and grandparents at their bris or naming. And many of us, I've had bar mitzvah students who've come in the bima and said, I'm wearing my grandfather's cufflinks or my grandmother's pearls, or a mother or any of us saying, I'm wearing a scarf or a suit or a blazer or whatever that connects me to someone alive or not, but someone I love or who taught me. And then, surprise, there's the fourth backdrop, Torah. This week we learned about the priestly garments worn by Aaron and his sons, the priests. The people are to make Bigdei Kodesh, sacred garments, for the purpose of the priests to wear them, for what is called dignity and adornment. These garments, interestingly enough, were to be passed down throughout the generations for the priests to wear and be ordained in. And they were only to be worn for ritual objects. Rabbi Norman Cohn, our teacher at the Hebrew Union College, as many of you heard a number of years ago, actually, at Rabbi Daniel's installation here at NSCI, Rabbi Norman Cohn is a scholar and professor of Midrash. And he explains that the priestly garments were considered to be holy, that they actually were thought to embody the essence of God, of the divine. And the garments were thought in ancient times to actually really have God in them, to possess inherent sanctity. So when the priest put the garments on, it was as if he had God on him or wearing them. It was almost as if God's presence was evident when one encountered the high priest, that the priest was wearing God upon him. When the priest didn't wear the garments, that is, when the priest wasn't engaged in ritual objects, he was essentially a regular guy, not exactly. Literally, clothes made the man. Today, in 2019, we have no more priesthood in Judaism. That went out with the destruction of the temple. And we no longer have all those official garments that the priests did. In fact, our Torahs, our Sifrei Torah, our Torah scrolls wear garments that are very similar to the descendants of those priestly garments. So we can put on a tallis, or even rabbis and cantors can put on a white robe on Yom Kippur, but there's no God in that, though maybe it has meaning beyond. But we can still look to garments and the meaning behind them. We can look to distinctiveness, we can look at history, and we can look at ritual. The things that to any of us might render those garments seemingly sacred, like a tallis, or ordinary, like a shirt, a tie, dress, a suit, nose. But that could make them holy in our eyes. Rabbi Arthur Greene defines kadosh, or holy, as many of us know, as dedicated or set aside. And he explains that holiness has about it the sense of loftiness or transcendence, saying that the holiness of God is a depth we can never fathom as humans. I agree with him. We are not at God's holiness. But I do believe that we can reflect on holiness and aspire to it in our daily lives. Holiness of time, holiness of place, holiness of action as we act ethically and ritually in our world, and even to the holiness of our garments. A few years ago, on our NSCI Women's Retreat, we had this Torah portion, and we studied the priestly garments generally, but we also each brought an article of clothing that was for us sacred to introduce ourselves. It was amazing. We saw clothing that connected the women on this retreat to mothers and grandmothers, clothing that gave people professional identity, that marked independence at some stage of someone's life, clothing that provided confidence, clothing that was seen or unseen, and clothing, as I'm looking at Lily, thinking of her dress, that symbolized freedom and new clothing in a new land. On that retreat, we studied the ritual of tzitzit, of wearing a talit. We considered what that ritual, which is traditionally male, was about for women. What is it to take that on, take on the commandments? And we made talitot, some that are on our tallis rack outside our sanctuaries on Shabbat morning. Thinking about what does it mean to wear a talit as a woman. Interestingly, a mitzvah traditionally for men, but women are not excluded from. And what should those talitot look like? What did it feel for us to put them on or not put them on? And for all of us that weekend, the definition of sacred garments was expanded. It wasn't just the things that were officially religious, the clothes that had deep meaning and history and pride in our lives. As I read that Washington Post article that I quoted to you a few moments ago about the garments of the women of Congress, I was moved. I thought a great deal about the power of the statements each woman made, and frankly, what guts it took to dress differently from the norm or expectation. And I thought about the progress of history that they could do this. The full story of these women in our government, well, that remains to be seen as they take on their responsibilities. As we watch it unfold, let's look in our own closets. Let's look at the history and statements made by our garments. I know there's lots going on TV and in writing about cleaning out your closets, right? How many people are watching that Marie Kondo show about talking to your garments? Well, here's the thing. She says, get rid of the garment if it doesn't make you happy. I think that's it. I haven't watched the show. I'm going to tell you the opposite. No, don't keep every article of clothing in your closet. But look at the clothes that make you uncomfortable for the right reasons. What are the clothes that make you want to stand up and speak your values, represent your history, make a difference in our world? Put them on or take them out. And think about our responsibilities as Jews to speak out for those in our communities, those in our land who don't have, and to those who we've elected to say, these are our values, this is our history, this is what is sacred to us. Let us put on the garb of our identity, our pride and our history. Let our clothing speak our values, but even more, let us speak our values. Indeed, let our clothes make the man and make the woman. Most importantly, let our clothes make a difference.